Good. So, we in the middle of a year-long theme, which we say every week, so you must know by now, a year-long theme looking at Buddhism through time and space. And we've just been looking for a few weeks at the period of time when Buddhism entered Tibet and some aspects of Tibetan Buddhism. So we spent 2 weeks looking at a figure called Padmasambhava for the last 2 weeks. And this evening I'm going to be talking about a different Tibetan, a very important Tibetan teacher called Milarepa, and a bit about his life and what we can learn from that. And Milarepa is just a hugely inspiring and important figure from Tibetan history. Come on in. And he's important across all the schools of Tibetan Buddhism, but particularly, especially with the school which Lama Rigzin is associated with, called the Karma Kagyu school. So Milarepa, one of his disciples, began that tradition. That's a tradition that's still being practiced today. So it's interesting just to hear a bit about the life of this very unusual and inspiring character called Milarepa. And the title of the talk we've got down is From Black Magic to Green Yogi. And that gives you a bit of a flavour, a bit of an advert as to what the story of Milarepa is like. And it's a kind of a story that could be a Hollywood blockbuster. It could be turned into a Hollywood blockbuster. There was a film, I think there's a film made about Milarepa, a kind of low-budget film made a few years ago, but it really could be a Hollywood blockbuster. It's got kind of a story of revenge, murder, heroic endeavours, magic, mystery. And there's also songs. Milarepa was famous for songs, so it could become a musical or something. His film could turn into West End musicals. So it's a very dramatic and entertaining story. From his life as well, there's some important things that we can draw out and learn from his life that help us, with our approach to practice today in this age, in this culture. So a bit about Milarepa really, and what we can learn from him. So Milarepa, I don't actually know, I should have learned it, but I don't know exactly when he lived, but it was sometime in medieval Tibet. I don't know the precise time, but you can probably look it up on Wikipedia. But he lived in several hundred years ago in Tibet. And he was born, the name Milarepa was given to him apparently later, and it means something like, he who wears the cloth garment, something like this. But when he was born, his father gave him the name, a Tibetan name which meant good news, or joyful hearing, good news, something like this. And he was born into quite a relatively wealthy family at the time. It kind of was, Tibet still, until very recently, was a place of a lot of farming. And his family owned land, and his father was a trader. So in the village, they had quite a good standing, his father and his family. But it's quite a tragic tale. The first part of it's quite tragic anyway, so that's the first part of the story. Because what happened is when Milarepa was about 8 or 9, his father became very sick, and he realised he probably wasn't going to live for very long. So what he did was invited an aunt and uncle to come and stay with him, and basically wrote out his instructions, his last will and testament, and he said that Milarepa would inherit all of the land, Milarepa would inherit the house, and basically, and there would be a particular woman who would become his wife when he came of age. But until that time, guardians would look after the property for the family. And his aunt and uncle agreed to this. Said that's completely fine. We'll take care of everything. But of course, as you can probably imagine, as soon as Milarepa's father died, his aunt and uncle took possession. They took possession of the land and possession of the family house. And Milarepa and his mother and his sister became slaves. Actually, they were treated very, very harshly. They became slaves to his auntie and uncle. They were made to work very, very hard, and they were kind of dressed in very, very kind of rough clothing, given scraps to eat. So it became it was a very sad story. But what was even sadder, I suppose, was Milarepa's mother became really bitterly angry. She was really resentful, and really kind of bitter towards the aunt and uncle, and she wanted revenge. She was plotting and harbouring this resentment. She wanted to get revenge. She wanted to get her own back on the aunt and uncle. So when Milarepa became a teenager, she saved up a pot of money, and she sent him off to a local black magician in the mountains. So Milarepa went off on a horseback and found this black magician. And basically his mother wanted revenge. She wanted Milarepa to become a powerful black magician so they could get revenge on the auntie and uncle. And this is what Milarepa did. He trained with this teacher of the dark arts of black magic. And he became skilled in manipulating the forces of the earth, apparently we're told, and to ill effect. He became a really, really good meditator, really kind of powerful meditator, but in quite dark ways. And he learned all these practices, but they still weren't the ones he wanted. He wanted really dark practices. He wanted to get real revenge on his aunt and uncle, to avenge his mother, to avenge his family. So it's said, I've heard different versions of it. I heard a version where there was a practice he wanted called Tsar of the Blue-Black Face. This was the practice that he wanted, Tsar of the Blue-Black Face. And it was a particular incantation, a very, very dark, powerful incantation. So, the teacher said, well, I'll give this to you, but beware, be careful, because it's dangerous and it comes at a cost. And Milarepa was, whatever, give me the practice, I want the practice. So he was given the practice, performed this incantation, Tsar of the Blue-Black Face. And lo and behold, apparently the legends say this kind of terrifying figure appeared and said, is this really what you want? This will come at a price, this will come at a cost. Milarepa said, yes, give me the teachings, give me the revenge. And what's said to have happened is in his village, his auntie and uncle were holding a wedding feast for Milarepa's cousin. Their son was having a wedding feast. What happened was basically plagues of locusts, scorpions, all these terrifying dark insects descended on the wedding feast and started to attack the guests at the wedding feast. And the horses at their farmhouse became so terrified they started to pull away from their stable, and they started to pull the foundations of the house started to quake, started to kind of tremble. And then apparently a very massive, huge scorpion appeared and started to attack the central pillar of the house. And the whole house collapsed and crushed the wedding party, killing all of the guests apart from the auntie and uncle. So 35 people were killed apart from his auntie and uncle. So Milarepa's mother was overjoyed. She was absolutely delighted. She was delighted. This is what she wanted. She wanted revenge for all the people that had hurt her family. The villagers became very cross when they could see her celebrating. They could see what happened. They turned on his mother, and so his mother got in touch with Milarepa and said, send massive hailstorms, which is what Milarepa did, and destroyed the crops. All the crops of the village were destroyed. So Milarepa's mother was delighted. She was very pleased. But Milarepa was very troubled. He became very, very troubled by what he'd got himself into. You could see that he'd got himself into some very difficult, very dark places, some very spiritually deep trouble. And basically, in our culture, we don't see it quite like this, but in Tibetan culture at the time, Milarepa would see that he was in for a very, very bad rebirth. He'd killed 35 people. Other people would have died because of the crops that he'd destroyed. There would be famine. So basically, Milarepa had caused people to die, and he was deeply troubled. He could see he was in big trouble, and he felt deeply remorseful. He felt troubled by what he'd done. So pause a story there. Just ask, kind of, how might this have happened? Kind of, what can we learn from this first part of the story? What is it that we can learn from this first part of the story? The first thing to draw out is really just the kind of the destructive, power and the kind of devastating power of hatred and anger. Actually, that these mental states of anger, hatred, ill will cause harm. They obviously cause harm for other people, but they're damaging for ourselves. They're not states we want to develop. So I just want to revisit for people who, most of us who have done this course will be familiar with this picture. But the law of karma, the Buddhist law of karma, which says in a way we've got a choice. We've got a choice over in a way, what kind of person we become. What kind of person we become, the choices we make about the kind of states that we develop, the kind of personality we develop. And then that in turn develops and dictates the kind of world that we experience. So we've got this chart. Our actions become habits, and our habits becomes our personality. They become our personality. And then that becomes our life, and that determines the kind of world that we experience. So for Milarepa's mother, she basically had this simplified version of the wheel of life, but we can basically see how our cravings, we make these choices, so our patterns, our habits just get deeper and deeper into grooves. And and we've got a choice about what kind of personality we develop, what kind of actions we choose, what kind of personality we develop. And for Milarepa, his mother, she got obsessed with resentment, bitterness, hatred, ill will, rage. And Milarepa he bought into this, he got caught up in this. And we've also got habitual ways of thinking, which often we just assimilate, we don't realise we've got, but we can get caught up in the ways of thinking of groups, of society, of media, of our family. So for Milarepa, he didn't kind of really question whether it was a good idea to do what his mother wanted. He just, his mother wanted revenge. That was what he needed to do. So in a way, we kind of assimilate these ways of thinking, these habitual ways of thinking. But also the choices we make, the actions we take really become deep grooves in our being. So for obviously for Milarepa and his mother, they just kind of harboured these thoughts of resentment. They've gone round and round, they become deeper and deeper. The real bitterness, real resentment. To the extent, to the quite extreme extent that they became very, that Milarepa could commit murder. Basically, those states got so out of control that Milarepa could actually take somebody's life. So our actions become grooves. Our actions become grooves, the kind of personality we have determines the kind of world that we experience. So in particular, there's two ways that this works really. Two main ways it works. One is the world reflects back to us our kind of state. So if we harbour revenge in this quite extreme case, if we want revenge and we're quite aggressive, well, the world will be quite aggressive back to us. And this was born out in the story of Milarepa. Milarepa's mum wanted revenge, the villagers wanted revenge, and basically you just get this kind of cycle, perpetual cycle. And you see the same kind of things right now in the situations with Israel and Palestine. You've got basically two sides just wanting revenge, wanting retaliation, and it just doesn't get better. So the world reflects back to us our personality, our actions, but also we see the world through our mental states. So if we live in very beautiful, expansive mental states, we'll see a very beautiful world around us. But if we harbour and develop dark states, negative states, well, we'll see that kind of world. We'll live in that kind of world. And unfortunately for Milarepa and his mother, that's what happened for them. Basically they lived in very dark states of resentment, rage, hatred. And basically if in those kind of states you become isolated, you become cut off from other people. And to the extreme case that Milarepa was able to commit murder, he got so kind of cut off from other people, removed, isolated from other people, he was able to commit murder. So that's just pausing the story there, just to revisit very briefly the Buddhist teaching on karma, the law of karma, and basically that we need to make very careful choices about the kind of states we produce. Obviously, hopefully none of us are going to get to this stage where we're going to commit murder, but we need to take the law of karma very, very seriously, and I'll say more about that in a little while. So Milarepa, going back to the story, Milarepa he's in a difficult place. He's murdered 35 people, he's destroyed the crops of his village. But also there must be other strands in Milarepa, actually. There's obviously other very, very strong strands to Milarepa's being, because he recognises how wrong his life has gone, the massive wrong turn his life has taken. He recognises that. And he recognises actually what he needs is to become enlightened. Buddhism has taken place. Buddhism has kind of taken root in Tibet at this time. There'll be monasteries, there'll be Buddhist teachers. Milarepa realised he needed to seek out a Buddhist teacher, and he needed to become enlightened. In a way, that was what was going to be his only path, his only solution was to become enlightened in this lifetime. And actually, he had quite a big sense of himself. He'd become a very powerful black magician. He'd learned just in a few weeks how to manipulate the dark arts. And he thought, this is going to be easy. I'm going to be able to find the right teacher. I'll be able to get enlightened. This is going to be the solution. So he found a few teachers. He went to a few different teachers, and they said to him, basically, well, they didn't say you've got an attitude problem, but I think that's probably what they were thinking. And they said, we can't help you, I'm afraid. We're not going to be able to help you. But the person you need is a guy called Marpa the translator. And Marpa the translator is a really colourful character, really interesting character, very kind of larger-than-life character. I don't know if this is appropriate to say, but I kind of imagine him as a bit like Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, but fat and drunk, basically. That's kind of, he's described as, Marpa was a farmer. He wasn't kind of a usual monk teacher. He was a kind of lay person. He had a wife. He was a farmer. Apparently he liked beer. But he was a really remarkable practitioner. He travelled to India and seen one of the great teachers called Naropa and received the teachings, the true teachings and initiations, the highest teachings from, and mastered them from Naropa. So he was a really unconventional character. He reminds me a bit like some of the Zen teachers that we heard of a few months ago. And he did have a stick as well, which we might hear about later, like some of the Zen teachers. So Milarepa went on to Marpa and said, Marpa, prostrated, great teacher, I need help, I'm a great sinner, I need help. I want to become enlightened, give me the highest teachings, I need to become enlightened, that's my only rescue, I need to become enlightened, give me the highest teachings. And Marpa was kind of he was kind of a bit encouraging and a bit dismissive at the same time, and just saying, well, you'll get I might give you the teaching. So, and sometimes it's quite harsh actually, and say to Milarepa, well, you've committed great crimes and you want the teachings from me. Why should I give you the teachings? And then the next morning he said, well, maybe I was a bit harsh last night. Maybe I can't give you the teachings, but teachings takes a bit of time. Let's not rush into it. Teaching takes time. First of all, build me a big tower. I want to make a stupa, and I need a big tower making. So build me a round tower. So Milarepa really wanted the teaching, so he set out and it took him some time, he built a very big round tower for a stupa. And Marpa came along and just knocked the tower down, and said, I didn't want a round stupa, I wanted a square stupa and a square tower, build me a square tower. So Milarepa did that, he put all the stones back where they were, built a square tower, and it took a long time building a square tower. And Marpa said, I didn't ask for a square tower, why have you built a square tower? I didn't want a square, I wanted a semicircle tower. So this went on, Marpa would give Milarepa instructions, Milarepa would build the tower kind of faithfully, Marpa would come along and just kind of dismiss it, knock it down. And he would also be kind of a little bit mocking of Milarepa as well. He called him great magician. Oh, come on, great magician, build me another tower, great magician. And Milarepa was really, really determined, he wanted the teachings. Each time he'd say, well, now can I build a tower, now can I have the teachings, master? And Marpa would say, build me another tower, then you can have the teachings. And each time Milarepa would build another tower, each time there'd be something just not quite right with the tower, and it was in the wrong place, it was the wrong shape. And just had the wrong stone right at the bottom, so don't leave the tower intact, but take that stone right out at the bottom. And Milarepa would take all the stones down, put them all up again. So poor old Milarepa at this point developed huge, great sores across his back. He was carrying boulders across his back to make the towers, and he developed great sores across his back. And each time he was saying to Marpa, please give me the teachings. I need the teachings. Can I have the teachings this time? And Marpa said, one last tower. I would just build me one last tower, then you can have the teachings. And Milarepa said, look, can I get your wife to be a witness? I don't believe you. If your wife will witness, I'll do it. And so he agreed, yeah, my wife can be the witness. And his wife witnessed it, okay. And so I'll build the tower. And basically, and then Milarepa crept into the back of some teachings. There were some teachings happening. And Milarepa wanted to hear the teachings. So, now's the time I can hear the teachings. He crept in the back, and Marpa saw him. grabbed him by his hair and scolded him and threw him out and said, what are you doing? Knock this tower down. And so Milarepa just became totally, completely dejected and said, I don't think he's ever going to give me the teachings. He went to see Marpa's wife, I don't think he's ever going to give me the teachings. I think I'm just going to go home, I'm going to give this up. So Marpa's wife pleaded with Marpa, and he said, no, he needs to build another tower, then he can have the teachings. And so Marpa's wife took pity on Milarepa, and she forged a letter from Marpa and said, take this to another teacher, and it says it's from Marpa, and then you can have the teachings. So Milarepa took, and she gave him some gifts to give to this teacher. So he took the forged letter, he took the gifts to this other teacher. And when Marpa found out, he flew into a rage and he chased after his wife with his stick all around the house. So he was a real colourful character, very unconventional teacher. And but basically Milarepa returned, and Marpa said, okay, now I will give you the teachings. Now I will give you the teachings. But really, it's a bit too early, it's a bit too soon. If you'd have built that last tower, you would have been ready for the teaching. But the teaching won't be you're not fully ready for the teaching, but I'm going to give you them anyway. And so Marpa, it does seem like he's been very, very cruel, very, very harsh to Milarepa. But what Marpa said afterwards is that he actually saw that Milarepa had real potential. He was kind of one of his best student. He was his greatest student. But what he needed was to build these towers. He had a very, very big sense of himself, a real kind of ego problem, a big kind of sense of his own importance. He thought he was a great meditator. So Marpa was refusing to give him any meditation teachings until he got rid of this attitude, basically, until he'd got rid of this problem. And Marpa really, really cared, he loved Milarepa, he really wanted him to get the teachings, but could see this is what he needed. So again we'll kind of pause the story and just explore what can we draw out of this? What can we draw out of this episode where poor Milarepa is desperate to receive the teachings, and he just faces adversity after adversity and kind of humiliation after humiliation. What can we draw out of that? Well, the first thing to say probably is it was a real extreme situation. So Milarepa had murdered 35 people and destroyed the crops of his village, so it was a real extreme situation. And he'd become very, very isolated, very, very cut off, but in a way kind of quite an extreme deluded state. He'd become really self-obsessed. He thought he was a great meditator, a great practitioner. He thought he could get enlightened overnight. And actually what he needed was very, very different from what he wanted. What he wanted was the highest teaching straight away. But what he needed was to sort out his attitude problem. Basically, he needed to be taught humility. He needed to purify the karma. He needed to kind of really chip away at all these ingrained habits he developed. These very, very deep-rooted strands of his being. So basically, what Milarepa wanted was the highest teachings, but what he needed was something very, very different. So, what can we learn from that? In a way, we don't always get what we want in the spiritual life, or what we want in the spiritual life isn't what we need. It isn't always what we need. So, and in a way, we sign up for the spiritual life, and we're committed to the spiritual life. But what we get sometimes, or what we need, isn't going to be what we want. So we're lucky. We don't have to build towers. We don't have to carry great big rocks around on our back. That's probably not what we need. But our equivalent of those towers are the practices. What we need are the practices that we're given in this movement. What we need in the West is mindfulness of breathing. We need metta bhavana practice. We need ethics. We need puja. We need friendship. We need to build Sangha. We need to really study the Dharma. They're the things that we need. But they might not necessarily be what we want. Particularly in the West, we've got everything's there. Everything's on our doorstep. Everything's just one kind of mouse click away. We can get the highest teachings if we want to. We can look on the internet. We can find really high advanced teachings on the internet if we want to. But that's not really going to be much use for us. It's not really what we need. Basically, we need to become more aware of our ingrained habits. We need to become more aware of our personality and the kind of the strands, the habits. So we need the mindfulness of breathing to become more aware of these habits. And then we need to practice metta and ethics to change, to purify that. We need to change and develop more positive states. So we need the metta bhavana, we need ethics. We need puja to, in a way, to wake up our deeper emotions, to engage our deeper emotions with what's highest in the universe. And maybe some of the most difficult practices, something that the most similarities to building a tower and knocking it down and building a tower and knocking it down is friendship, actually. Maybe our equivalent of building towers is friendship. We just need to, we keep putting ourselves there, and occasionally, people will let us down, and then we keep putting ourselves there, and then people might let us down, or we need to open up and we don't want to. We need to be challenged and we don't want to. So friendship is a really practice that for a lot of us we really, really need to cultivate. And likewise, Sangha, study. These are all the practices that we need. There, in a sense, what we need. What we might want might be higher practices, more advanced practices, but what we need is what we've got, really. So we can want shortcuts, we can want something higher, something more advanced, but what we need is just to work, just to really engage with these practices, to really engage, to commit with them. So Milarepa needed to kind of work on his ego. He needed to work on this real kind of sense of self-obsession, self-importance that he had. He also, because of his situation, his extreme situation, he needed to develop resolve and commitment. He needed to really be able to stick out the practices. So Marpa didn't want to give Milarepa the practices until he knew that Milarepa really had the resolve and could really stick out them. So if we commit to the spiritual life, we're going to encounter adversity. And this is going to be part and parcel of life, part and parcel of the spiritual life, as we'll encounter difficulties, we'll encounter adversity. And basically, if we are able to stick at it and keep going in those difficult times, well, then that's what will make us that's what will help us to grow. We'll grow from those situations, from those difficult situations on the spiritual life, and that life throws at us. If we're able to stick at ethics and to stick at metta, if we can respond with kindness in those difficult situations, and to respond with friendliness, and just to do what's ethical in those difficult situations, then that's what will make us grow. So I've got just a recent story from my life, and a kind of equivalent of adversity and the kind of the towers that get built sometimes, and just having to kind of just respond with adversity, and that was changing Robert's nappies, my baby Robert. So he's 8 weeks old now, but when he was just in his kind of first week or second week, something like that, or maybe his first week, he hadn't yet filled a nappy, and so we were kind of waiting for him to fill a nappy. And so he then filled his nappy, which was great, which is what he's supposed to do, what we wanted to happen. And so I'm very pleased to change his nappy, which is what you do. You respond to the situation. And I picked him up, really pleased with myself, and he filled his nappy again, just straight away. Kind of filled his nappy. Okay, well, I'll change his nappy again. So I changed his nappy again, cleaned him up, felt pleased with myself, picked him up, and immediately filled his nappy again. And 3 times in a row. But by this time I started thinking, why didn't you just do it all in one go? So I can relate a bit to Milarepa in these things. So sometimes life throws at us difficult situations, adversity, and what we're going to, are we going to stick at it in those difficult situations? I mean, that's not an extreme situation; it's a kind of day-to-day situation. But there'll be many situations where we face difficulties in the spiritual life, and sometimes quite serious kind of crises, or encounter real doubt. And are we going to stick at it, or are we going to give in a way when it gets a bit tough? And there's a Sufi story which is very appropriate. We tell it sometimes on the Mitra ceremonies about digging holes, which is that if you want to find water in the ground, then basically there's probably lots of places where you could dig holes, and you could dig in lots of places to find water. But at some point you're going to strike hard ground, you're going to strike rock, and it's going to be difficult to get past. So you've got choices to make. You could then at that point go and start to dig in a different place, and okay, well I'll just dig in a different place. But eventually, again, you'll encounter rock, you'll encounter difficult terrain. And again, you could just keep digging a series of holes in this terrain, and never really get into the water, never just end up with a series of shallow holes. And it's exactly the same with spiritual practice. We take on practices, and we start doing the mindfulness of breathing, and maybe initially we get really chilled, really calm, really blissful states. But maybe after a while, that stops happening, and our mind's distracted, our mind's clouded, it's not easy. And what do we do at that point? Do we discard the mindfulness of breathing and do a different practice, or do we just continue? And sometimes what we can end up doing is the practices that we like and not the practices that we need. So this is something to be careful of in the spiritual life. It might be possible. It probably is possible for people that there are different practices that suit us or different practices that we like, and they might not be the practices that we need to do the most. So an example of this might be, say it might be somebody who doesn't like the Metta Bhavana. So you decide, I'm not going to do the Metta Bhavana, I don't like the Metta Bhavana. But perhaps this is just one possibility. It could be possible that the reason you don't like the Metta Bhavana is because you might not be comfortable with emotions, or you might just not like people. And so doing the Metta Bhavana seems like quite a difficult practice to do. It's not an enjoyable practice to do. So it might not be what we want, but actually it's a practice that we need. So committing to doing the Metta Bhavana in that situation is what we need to do. Likewise, you might be somebody who doesn't like studying the Dharma, but it could be possible that actually you need to become able to think more clearly, to really think more accurately and more clearly, and Dharma study is what you need to do to get to that. You might be somebody who doesn't like puja, doesn't want to do puja, but actually puja could be what you need to engage your emotions, or to unblock your emotions, or to puja might be the practice you end up needing to do. So just something to bear in mind. Just question question to consider. If there's a practice you don't like doing, why is that? What is it about it? Could it be the practice that you actually need to be doing more of? And a word of caution to say, well, this isn't going to be true in every case. It could just be. You need some help or some advice with that practice, and it might become easier, and you might enjoy it more with some help or some advice. It could be, actually it's difficult to know sometimes what you need, what practice you actually need, and so help from friends or from guides can be helpful to work out what might be the practice that I need to do. But it's probably, it might not be the practice you want to do, or the practice that kind of suits you or you feel comfortable with. Because the spiritual life needs to challenge us, it needs to kind of draw us out of what our comfort zone, what we're used to, what we're familiar with. And if we just stick to doing what we like and what we find easy, we're going to carry on in the same old grooves, we're going to stay with being the same kind of person, with the same old personality. So the spiritual life will challenge you, and it will bring you into places you find difficult. And it's those places where you have to decide, okay, do I stop digging here if hit some rock, or do I carry on and eventually break through into where the real treasure is, where the water is. Something to consider. Which practices don't I like, and what could I, are they the practice I need? Is that the practice I need? Potentially. So going back to the story, so Milarepa has pleaded with Marpa. He's pleaded with Marpa for the teachings. He's built countless towers. He's got swords on his back, and finally he's been given the teachings. Marpa has given his blessing to Milarepa and explained all along he recognised Milarepa had real potential. He was going to be a star student, but he needed to go through these trials, these kind of difficulties. So he gives Milarepa the instructions, he gives him the teachings. And the first, what he says to Milarepa is, go back to your village for 1 week and meditate. And then go into the mountains, go into a cave, find yourself a quiet cave, solitary cave, and just really apply yourself to these teachings that I've given you. Just really apply yourself to them. So Milarepa, as a brief kind of interlude, I'll just quickly tell. Milarepa goes back to his village and discovers his mother has died. He's really been kind of longing to see his mother again, realise his mother has died. And goes back to his house, which is in ruins, and sees his mother's bones in a pile. And quite a poignant, really poignant episode. But for Milarepa comes a real strong realisation of impermanence. he really truly realises impermanence. Anyway, that he can't rely on his family. He couldn't rely, in a way, his mother wasn't going to make it better. He wanted all along his mum to kind of follow his mum's advice and to make it better. And he returned back to his village. His mother was dead. And maybe in a sign of what was to come for Milarepa, he meditated on his mother's bones, which sounds quite... He actually sat on his... Not he kind of didn't think about them. He sat on his mother's bones and meditated. He meditated on them, which is quite an extreme thing to do. But that's what he'd been told to do. He'd been told to meditate, and he said, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit here and meditate. That sounds quite an odd thing to do. But then Milarepa, he went off then after that. He followed his teacher's advice, and he'd really developed this really strong resolve by this point. He went off into the mountains. He found himself a cave, and he meditated, and he practiced, and he really he really worked on the teachings he'd been given. And it took him a long time, apparently about 8 years. And after 8 years, he broke through into enlightenment. He became a fully awakened, fully realised, enlightened being. But again, there were some kind of stories and hardships along the way. He ran out of food at one point, and he started to eat nettles. All he had around him was nettles. So he boiled them up and made nettle tea and nettle soup. And that's all he lived on. And apparently, I don't know if this is what's said to have happened in the story. He turned green from eating. All he ate was nettles, and he turned green. So he became this kind of green yogi in the hills, quite emaciated, kind of rough, kind of wild-looking yogi, green coloured. And I suppose a bit of an amusement and oddity for the villagers who wander around in the mountains and the visitors below. He get quite a reputation as kind of amazing kind of green yogi who kind of just didn't have any possessions. Milarepa didn't have any possessions. He had a begging bowl which broke. Apparently at one point his begging bowl broke, so he didn't even have a begging bowl. He had a tatty rag that he wore, kind of cotton rag. At one point that just blew off, so he had no clothes. He basically had no clothes or no possessions and just kind of wandered around. And people would tease him and mock him sometimes. And one time some of them visited him, and I think his sister brought in some new cloth and said, just please cover up your genitals, please cover up your penis, please. Just everyone's embarrassed. And apparently he sewed it into this kind of sock shape, this cloth, and made a kind of a cover, kind of sheath for his penis. So basically he just had this really kind of irreverent, kind of complete kind of counter-culture kind of way. He no longer cared about kind of what he was supposed to do, what people wanted him to do. He just lived a completely renunciant life, quite an extreme life. He lived in the mountains, he had no possessions. But actually, this sounds quite a harsh way to live, almost quite a kind of shocking way to live. But it's really striking. There's collections of Milarepa's songs. Apparently Milarepa sang songs to people with his teachings when they came to visit him. And Milarepa's songs are just full, firstly, of gratitude to Marpa. He always starts his songs with just gratitude to Marpa, who gave him what he needed, not what he wanted. But also just full of joy. Milarepa, his heart and mind was just full of bliss, full of joy, just a deep contentment. He didn't need anything to be happy. He didn't have any possessions because he didn't need any possessions. He was just completely full of bliss, completely happy. And it reminds me of the story we tell about the Buddha and King Ajatasattu, where the king goes to meet the Buddha and he takes his entourage, he takes all of his possessions, all of his things, and the Buddha just says to him, well, could you sit without that for an hour? Could you sit for 2 hours? Could you sit for 8 hours? And then eventually the king says, well, no, I can't. And the Buddha says, well, I can sit here, I can sit anywhere for an hour, for 8 hours, for as long as I want, and be happy, just be completely happy, blissfully happy, just be deeply, deeply happy. So, the idea to me, and I'm sure to other people as well, of giving up things, of letting go of things, not having, renunciation, not having the things that we have to distract us, sounds actually unpleasant. It sounds like not something I want to do. But actually what really we're giving up is dark mental states. Milarepa had given up those dark, angry, resentful mental states and replaced them with just deeply happy, blissful, joyful mental states, really full of gratitude and bliss. And my Marpa is a Mogavangsa. Mogavangsa is my Marpa powerful figure. And what he says, what he has said when people ask him, what is it, people ask him sometimes, what is it you give up as a Buddhist? And Mogavangsa said, you give up being miserable as a Buddhist. That's what yeah, so as a Buddhist, you give up being miserable, you become full of happiness and bliss. And then actually you don't need, it's like the equivalent of a child who grows out of playing with his toys or her toys. You know, when you're deeply happy and content, you don't need all the distractions or the toys that we think we need. Yes. So, yeah, there's another story, an anecdote which I was going to say earlier about Mogavangsa, my Marpa teacher, which is I also had a bit of an attitude problem, I suppose. Maybe I still have, but I had quite a strong attitude problem when I first got involved at the Buddhist Centre. And I thought I was quite special as well. I thought I was quite advanced, a bit like Milarepa when he sought out Marpa. And yeah, I was involved with the Sangha. I think at that stage I was either thinking about becoming a mitra or taking the next step, or I had done. And I started to meet with the Mogavangsa, and I said to Mogavangsa, I think I should have some kind of role around the Buddhist Centre. I'd like to have some kind of role, some kind of job at the Buddhist Centre. And I had in mind something, quite special, something really important. I don't know what it might have been, but maybe I don't know, something very glamorous and very important. And Mogavangsa said, "Oh, great. I've got a job, I've got a role that we needed to do. Could you change the light bulbs at the Buddhist Centre?" and my heart sank, and I thought, well, that's not what I had in mind. I had in mind maybe I'd become a chair or something like that. But okay, I thought, well, that's what needs to be done. I'll do that. I can be an advanced practitioner. I'll do what needs to be done. And so the next weekend I came along and I got the ladder out and I changed the light bulbs. I felt really good about myself. And all the light bulbs were changed in the Buddhist Centre. And then I never did it again after that. I never changed the light bulbs again after that. I just kind of, for some reason, I wasn't able, in the end I went to Mogavangsa and I had to resign from being the person who changed the light bulbs. I just wasn't, I had this big idea about how important it was, but actually I just wasn't, for some reason, wasn't integrated enough. I wasn't kind of able to do that job. I just kept forgetting to do it, or kind of didn't want to do it. And so I just had to pass the job on to somebody else who was capable of doing it. So that was a humiliating episode, but an important episode. And I suppose that's what the spiritual life can throw up, is episodes where you're humiliated, where you realise you're not as special as you think you are, and you're not as important as you think you are. And they're really important, really positive experiences, but very uncomfortable experiences as well. And they're the equivalent of these towers, and these kind of ordeals that Marpa inflicted upon Milarepa, these kind of necessary trials and humiliations in the spiritual life. Yeah. So there's not too much more to say really, other than Milarepa became a very important figure in the whole of the Buddhist tradition, but particularly in Tibetan Buddhism. And he basically lived a kind of bit of a reclusive life. He kind of carried on just living up in the mountains. He had proposals of marriage which he turned down, and kind of people wanted to make him their son, so he had inheritance, and he turned it all down. He basically just wanted to live on his own in the mountains, but people would flock around him. He'd attract disciples. So he was always surrounded by people, but and he was kind of always interacting with people, giving them teachings. And there's a whole collection of his teaching called the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa, which we've got a copy of in the library. There's not 100,000 songs, there's about 60 stories, it's called the 100,000 Stories songs. And so Milarepa then, he started to have disciples, important disciples, people who recognised could receive the teachings that Marpa had given to him. And these disciples had disciples, and a lineage started, and that lineage is the Karma, continues as the Karma Kagyu tradition, which Lama Buddhism practices. And there's the Sangha Ling Centre in Scotland, and there's the Sangha Zong Centre in London, which practice that tradition. So Milarepa is an important figure, and his story is very, very inspiring. We've just heard some episodes of his story this evening. And his exchanges with people are very, very entertaining as well, because he's got this kind of very, maybe he learnt this from Marpa, but it's very unconventional, irreverent approach to how people live. And so his stories are very amusing as well, so I'd encourage you to check out some of his stories. But basically, to conclude, it's very important for us to work with karma and to take control of karma, and to kind of shape the kind of habits, the kind of personality we develop, because that influences the kind of world that we experience. And we can live in a really dark, negative world where we're really polarised with people and there's a lot of hatred and revenge. Or we can really reshape, or we can work. We can kind of commit to a path of practice, path of training that will reshape our karma and turn our mental states into positive, blissful states. It's important that we are able to really develop that resolve to commit to training and to commit to practice, even when it gets difficult, even when there's adversity, because that's when we will grow. That's when we will grow and develop from those situations. And eventually, it's possible to achieve complete freedom and complete bliss. To have that real inner joy, inner bliss that the Buddha found and that Milarepa found. That's possible, and we can have tastes, we can have glimpses of that. One question also to consider is, well, have there been times when I've tasted that kind of inner bliss, or that taste of contentment, even just of contentment, where I've not needed to distract myself, where I've just felt happy with what I've got, where I am. It might be moments, it might be times in our lives, but it's really worth reflecting on and remembering if we've had episodes like that. It might be if we've been on retreat, we might have had times on retreat where we felt completely content and happy, maybe episodes in nature, experiences in meditation. When we're absorbed in an activity, have we ever had times where we felt content, deeply content, where we've not needed to distract ourselves? That's worth reflecting. But eventually it's possible to achieve that, to achieve contentment, bliss and happiness, inner happiness, and we can completely give up being miserable forever. We can give up being miserable forever. So thank you.